Good afternoon, everyone, again. Now we are moving to the second session for today, masterclass, entitled as Alternative Access Models for Innovative Treatment. In this session, we'll have three presentations. We'll start our, the first lecture will be presented by Dr. Bandar Balkhi. Dr. Bandar Balkhi is working as Assistant Professor at the Faculty of Pharmacy at King Saud University in Riyadh. Dr. Balkhi today will talk about risk-sharing agreements with a discussion of experiences and challenges in this matter. Please join me to welcome Dr. Bandar Balkhi. Dr. Bandar, are you around?
Assalamu alaikum.
Can you turn? Yeah, now we can see you.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Dr. Majid, for the introduction and for the nice part. So I'm very pleased today to be here and share some of the experience in the risk-sharing agreements. So today, basically, I'm going to talk about the performance-based agreement, which one of the form of the risk-sharing agreement. So we're going to go overview why this principle is being used, why it's increasing over the times, and how can be used here in our countries. So we know that in the last decade, the spending of healthcare is growing. That's mainly because of the aging population, because of the increase in the innovative medication that usually come at the highest price tag. So we can see from this figure that this focus about the Middle East and North Africa countries, so we can see here there's a steady increase in the health expenditure over time. So that's put a pressure in the healthcare provider, healthcare policymaker to try to see and focus about the benefits of the new innovation medication and try to allocate the resources more efficiently. So we can see here also the marketed of the, let's say, the innovative medication, more specialized medication, oncology, and we can see it's increasing over time. So these medications come with a lot of the benefit to the patients, to the provider. However, at the same time, it's come with the high price. So we cannot afford all of these medications together. So at the end, they have to make some decision about whether or not they're gonna like reimburse and use this medication for the patient. So we can see in the last 5 years, the total of these medication went to 6 billions, and now the next 5 years is gonna be jump to more than $165 billion. So it's a huge expenditure for the healthcare. So that's why a lot of the country now think about, okay, let's think about the value, if this medication has value or not. So that's why we can see there a huge shift from the volume-based healthcare system to the more like value-based healthcare system, where the manufacturer now not only required to perform and prove that their medication have quality, efficacy, safety to get to the market, however, they also have to confirm that their medication have the value. So talking about the value of the medication, we know that a lot of the medication get approved based on RCT, clinical randomized clinical trials. However, sometimes, especially with the orphan medication, we know that we have very small number in the clinical trials. So when they come to the reality, when they come to the local clinical setting, sometimes this not reflect the real world evidence. So sometimes we not see the benefit for these patients. So the insufficient evidence available at the registration to accurately estimate the clinical and cost effectiveness. So even though not all clinical, even the cost effectiveness cannot generate unless we have the appropriate data. So that's going to result in the delay reimbursement decision and patient access. So the patient will not have access to this medication until the payer can assess the value of this medication. So if we not have the data at the time of the registration or time that the patient can use it, so this may end up have delayed the medication for more than 2 or 5 years until the manufacturer can gather all the information. So this together threat the non-inclusion of the formulary list. This may also disincentive the industry like the manufacturer to promote and conduct a lot of the R&D in these type of medications, especially orphan drugs, where the low market potential is increasing. Also, along with the clinical, there is also significant budget impact, which may be sometimes not affordable by the payer. So it's not only the clinical and the value, also the cost sometimes is very high. So the payer cannot afford even though this medication have the value. So they have to think about some of the way to go around this. So policymakers want to ensure a better budget control, better allocation for their resources, and lower risk spending on the medication that we don't have full evidence about their clinical benefit and value. So that's where the entry agreements come from. That's where the risk sharing agreements come from. So it's gonna provide the patients with more rapid access to these innovative technologies. So they don't have to wait until we generate all the data to like confirm the value of these medication. No, now we can access to these medication. It's also bridge the gap between the urgent need for value-based approach that a lot of the country now move on and for the current reimbursement system. So also the payer and manufacturer with the aim to sharing financial risk. So that's the way forward. They have to sharing the risk between the payer and the manufacturer. And we will see a lot of the like issue and how they can solve it in the next few slides. So the main two types of the managed entry agreements, we have financial-based agreements, which is the most commonly used in the last decades, and also we have the outcome-based agreement, which is going to focus on today. So the financial-based agreements is basically something related to the price and the cost. It's not outcome-based. We'll not measure any outcomes here. So it's usually manage the budget impact. If like the payer concerned about the budget, they cannot afford paying for this medication. They're gonna like share the risk or the cost with the manufacturer. So basically, the manufacturer will pay back some money or some rebate for these type of medications. Sometimes they call utilization caps, where we're gonna restrict utilization for a certain amount for the patient. If they increase this utilization, then the manufacturer gonna pay back that amount, or they're gonna cover the rest of the quantity. The most commonly used is the price volume agreements. So where there's agreed between the manufacturer and the payer about the price and volume. So once we reach certain volume, after that, we're gonna receive certain discounts. So that's some sort of agreement that can give the payer a lot of discount if they like utilize more of the medications. So on the other hand, we have the outcome-based agreements. The outcome-based agreement is usually dealing with uncertainty that we have a benefit or cost effectiveness of the medication. If we didn't have enough data at the time of the launch, of the time we register the medication, then as I said, to make the rapid access, maybe we can go with this type of agreements. So this type of agreement is usually a risk-sharing agreement between the payer and the manufacturer. So both of them can have some benefits by rapid access of this medication to the patients, and also they're gonna share a lot of the uncertainty that this medication may have. So this outcome-based agreement comes in a different form, and they have a lot of the names that you can see in the terminology in the literature. Sometimes they call it risk-sharing agreement, sometimes they call it payment by results, sometimes they call it performance-based risk-sharing agreement. So these terms different by the countries and all mean the same thing, that they're gonna measure the outcome of the medications. So we have first payment pay result, where the manufacturer agree with the payer that, okay, we're gonna give you the medication and gonna we watch the effectiveness of the medication. If the medication is not effective, we're gonna reimburse you even the full or partial amount of that, the amount that you pay. Or we're gonna give you a discount if also the medication is not effective. If effective, you're gonna pay me back the full amounts. The other form is called coverage with evidence development. This usually go with the medication that we don't have a lot of the evidence. So we're gonna cover this medication, we're gonna reimburse you, however, you have to collect the evidence till this time. So after you collect the evidence, we think they're gonna decide whether to reimburse you with the medication, so the value or not, if there is no value for your medications. A lot of the European countries have a lot of the experience in doing risk-sharing agreements. One of the countries, Italy, that use the performance-based agreements so much. So we can see here, they use the cost-sharing agreement and also payment by result, which is the outcome-based. So let's see the main difference between this and how Italy use these two types of agreements. So for the cost-sharing agreement, as we said here, we don't focus about the outcomes. So we are not like for the patient to see whether the medication is effectiveness or not. We just can agree from the beginning with the manufacturer about certain discount or certain rebate for eligible patients. So as I said, it can be here like a price of volume or utilization cap, expenditure cap. So from the beginning, we know how much we're gonna pay. So on the other hand, the payment by result procedure is that it starts the new treatment for all eligible patients. So we can restrict it for a subgroup patient. Then we can have two groups here. After the patient taking medication, some patient gonna be response, some medication will not respond. So if patient not response, we're gonna stop the medications. Then the overall patient cost and treatment will not reimburse to the manufacturer. So the manufacturer gonna be handle all these costs. Or sometimes gonna be like 50-50. So sometimes the payer gonna pay a little and the manufacturer gonna pay the rest. So this is called payback by market authorization of the manufacturer. If there is the response by the patients, if the medication really work as the manufacturer said, if they really work as we saw in the RCT, then we're gonna continue the treatment with the patient and then again the treatment was reimbursed by NIH in Italy. So that's the main difference between the cost sharing, where they just have some sort of a discounting or rebate from the beginning, and outcome based, where it's required more data to follow the and confirm that the patient have a value from using these types. So performance-based risk-sharing agreement is the win-win situation for the payer and manufacturer, and also for the patient. We will see it in the next slide. For the manufacturers, demonstrate effectiveness of their products. They can see how their product works against competitors, which also assists the payer making formulary decisions. So maybe after the end of the agreement, the payer will decide, okay, we saw the value of this medication, so now we will include this medication in our formulary. For the payer, it's give experience with the products. So we're going to use it for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years until the end of the agreement. We're going to reduce uncertainty that we have about the value. So as you said before beginning of the agreement, we have a lot of uncertainty about the safety, about the efficacy, about the long-term effectiveness, about the quality of life, utility. So we have a lot of uncertainty. Once we get into the agreement, by the end of the agreement, these all uncertainty should be gone. So we have a clear evidence now about this medication, how this medication works, and whether or not we're gonna be like include this medication in our formulary or not. Here I picked just 2 examples for the risk-sharing agreements. So the first one was in the UK for the medication called ranibizumab for macular degeneration. So we can see here that it's a partner between the drug company Novartis and the UK. It's back in 2008. So you can see that some Europe countries have a lot of experience in doing risk sharing. So they use financial risk sharing agreement here. So they use utilization cap where they're gonna just agree about the capping for 14 injection. If the patient uses more than 14 injections, then the company gonna pay the rest for that. So if the patient uses 20, the company gonna be cover the 6 injections that the patient needs. The outcome metric, the visual acuity, because we just gonna here focus about the number of injections the patient can. So you can see this clear criteria and very simple for both payer and manufacturer. The other example for the hydrogenated is gonna be used for the OSSE process. So this is this type was done in the United States, where the drug company give rebate for health plan based on the fracture required while patient are on the medication. So we know this medication used to prevent the fracture if the patient have osteoporosis. If the patient uses this medication, however, the patients have fracture. If this medication doesn't prevent the fracture, then the company gonna be covered all the fracture costs for that patient. So the outcome measure here is the fracture confirmed with the X-ray. So you can see here we have to have a lot of the data. You have to like follow the patients to see if the patient have fracture, if the patient like due to osteoporosis or not. So it's heavily need a lot of the data. So the main advantage of that patient for the patient perspective is that the patient will now have access to the medication need. If we don't have this type of agreement, this may be delayed access to the patients for a long period of time. So on the other hand, we have also another like benefit that this is going to be promote the investment in the innovation medications. So by like using this type of agreement, a lot of the company will be doing the R&D in the rare disease like orphan medications. For the manufacturer also, the win situation for them is going to give them access to the market, it's going to be obtain reimbursement for the drug, which were likely to be rejected if the drug is not like using this type of agreements. One of the also, let's say, benefits for the manufacturer is that this type of a discount that's going to be applied in this type of agreement will not touch the risk price that's set by other agencies. So the risk price is not changes, it's not like touchable, because this agreement is like sometimes confidential between the payer and the manufacturer. For the payer, what the payer gain is going to be better control for their budgets, increase cost effectiveness. They're going to be assess the value of the medication. They can be focused more about the value. They can shift for the value-based medications and also improve use and access of the medication that they have. It also gives the payer a lot of advantage to reevaluate the situation after the end of the agreements period. It's also overcome with some of the disadvantage. From the patient perspective, it's barrier to participate. Sometimes this type of agreement only have to be done in the specific center, so sometimes the patient doesn't have access to that. This product might not show benefit they expect. So the patient maybe use the medication, maybe have a lot of the side effect harm, they don't see any value and they see any benefit of using this medication. Sometimes withdraw the technology after the end of the agreement, maybe the patient chooses for 1 or 2 years after the end of agreement, the payer decide not to continue with this agreement or not to include the medication in the formula. For the manufacturer, there is some like drawback, like they have to share a risk of the discounting, they have to sometimes pay back if the medication is not be effective, also price reduction for non-responsive patients. Also, the manufacturer have a lot of the like heavy work to do by collecting a lot of the data to confirm that these patients have benefit of using this medication. So they have to confirm the value of the medication by collecting additional data. For the payer, it's also have additional efforts, additional administration effort required to make new drug available to patients. They have to spend a lot of the time negotiate with the drug companies. They have to monitoring the patient. They have to follow up the patients. They have to collect a lot of the data and also develop it, maybe register for that. If we decide to implement risk agreement, what's we require? We require first formal agreement between the stakeholder, the payer, the manufacturer in specific. We have to clearly identify the rationale for the agreement, why we need this agreement. We have to identify the data, what's the outcome we are looking for, and the number of patients going to be using this medication. And also, so we have to specify all the criteria that's in it. So duration sometimes is as low as 1 year, sometimes go to 4 or 5 years. After the expiration of, after the end of the agreement, sometime they both stakeholders agree to extend the agreement, especially if their lack of the answer about uncertainty that they have from the beginning. So maybe they need more time to collect the data. As I said, this type of agreement requires a lot of the data collections. So we have detailed data about record each time the patient receives the treatment, when the patient receives it, what's going to happen to the patients, how many doses the patient received, the quantity, and etc. We have to quality check the data because these data are going to be useful for the outcome-based agreement. So we need this data to make the decision. So we have to ensure that this data is complete and this data is accurate. We have to understand from the beginning about the difference in the efficacy and effectiveness and why we're going to move forward for real-world evidence. And when we collect the data in the local setting, how different this data from other data may be collected from outside. So we can see this type of agreement is usually local context. So it's basically have to be developed and formatting according to our local needs. For local data collection, we have to follow up the patient for a long period of time, especially if the outcome will not like be obvious until maybe 3rd or 4th year. So we may need to have spend a lot of the time just follow up collecting the data and ensure that the patient have the outcome that we want. Real world evidence collected from the registry. So that's why when we talk about Italy, they have like very nice data register for the medication. So sometimes it's very difficult for the company that don't have this type of register to go with this type of agreement, because we need a lot of the data just to inform that the payer and stakeholder about how benefit this medication. So collecting this data can improve healthcare by giving data on disease epidemiology. We need the safety and also effectiveness, how this medication gonna be work in the local settings. Will improve in the digital system around the world, especially in MENA country, in our country. So maybe the use of the register in the future going to be increased, which facilitate the use of this agreement. So there's a need for collaboration in order to develop the register for a lot of the disease. We need collaboration between all stakeholders like scientific, academic, regulatory, caregiver, healthcare provider, a lot of the patient organization, also payer, to overcome any barrier that maybe we're gonna face to collect these data.
Sorry, Dr. Bender, you have 2 minutes.
Okay. So one of the major challenge for conducting this type of agreement is the data collection and availability of data. So here just to show you how much data that we need, like for the patient, medication, treatment status, treatment cycle, the outcomes, and we have to specify the reason for each patient. Why this patient not continue with the medications for long period of time until the end of the agreements. So the benefits for this agreement to reduce the payer risk for suboptimal purchasing for the medication that we have a lot of uncertainty, provide earlier access. We can see in the Italy, once they try to implement this type of agreement, the medication access is just 84 days compared to 343 days without this type of agreement. So we can see how huge improvement in the patient access based on this type of agreement. It also gives us enhanced generation of the real world medical evidence. Some challenge is significant payer and provider infrastructure, especially if we don't have register, if we don't have the data that is needed to assess the outcome of the medications. Sometimes the payer may not have the capability to monitoring and track all the pharmaceutical usage for individual patients, which is required to conduct this type of agreement. That's why you can see the most commonly used agreement is the financial-based agreement, because it doesn't have to require the outcome-based agreements. Overcome a lot of the barrier, we have to improve the awareness among all the stakeholders. We can improve the data system, which I can see we can improve it if we have digitalized healthcare system. We can change the incentive toward value-based orientations. So at the end, what we can see in the future is that there's a need to manage the access for innovation therapy, which gonna be see a lot of the future, like gene therapy or from medications. So where a lot of the regulatory approval give them fast track. So sometimes we don't have enough information to assess their value. So maybe increase interest to also by collecting the reward by payer. This also increase the advantage of having this type of the agreements. The better integration with the database maybe facilitate using this type of agreements. Despite a lot of the challenges that we mentioned here, performance-based agreements are feasible, especially in the developed and developing country. By tracking the performance of the product, manufacturer and payer have been able to facilitate the entry of new technology into the market. So we can facilitate enter the new technology, even that we have a lot of uncertainty as the payer, by allowing the base of the reimbursement to be dependent and determined by the outcome of the medication that we're gonna gather along the roads. So this is for my talk. Thank you a lot for listening.